Welcome to Lucid Soma. Have you ever noticed that the harder you try to fix your life, the more you seem to run into the exact same wall? You change your job, you rewrite your morning routine, you download the latest productivity apps, and you swear to yourself that this time, things will be different. And for a few weeks, maybe they are. But eventually, the fog rolls back in. The exact same anxieties creep back into your chest. The same subtle friction ruins your relationships. The same invisible ceiling caps your income, your creativity, and your peace of mind. It is a quiet, exhausting cycle that millions of high-achieving Americans find themselves trapped in every single day. We look around at a society that is hyper-optimized for success, yet we see a population drowning in a collective sense of quiet desperation. We blame the current state of the economy, we blame the cold algorithms of social media, we blame our toxic bosses, or we blame our childhood upbringing. But what if the ultimate barrier keeping you from skyrocketing past the noise is not out there in the world at all? What if it is a massive, structural psychological blind spot, a hidden architecture in your own mind that you are actively ignoring, protecting, and running away from every waking moment? More than half a century ago, the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung dedicated his life to mapping this exact phenomenon. He realized that the human psyche possesses a terrifyingly efficient survival mechanism. To function in modern society, to please our parents, to fit into corporate culture, and to build an acceptable public persona, we split our identity in two. We take all the traits, impulses, raw desires, insecurities, and aggressive drives that society deems unacceptable, and we bury them deep underground, away from the light of consciousness. Jung called this buried territory the shadow. It is the ultimate blind spot. And here is the brutal, systemic irony of human psychology: the more you try to ignore your shadow, the more absolute power it gains over your destiny. It operates from the darkness of your subconscious, pulling the strings of your behavior, dictating your compulsive choices, and sabotaging your success, all while leaving you wondering why you keep experiencing bad luck. Jung famously captured this trap in a single, chilling warning when he wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Look closely at the landscape of modern American life today. We see a culture filled with overachievers who are burning out by the age of 30. They have the degrees, the salaries, the beautiful apartments, and the professional titles, yet they feel completely hollow inside. To compensate, they double down on hustle culture, treating their personal lives like a corporate business metrics dashboard. They track their sleep, optimize their diets, and schedule every minute of their day. But this hyper-optimization is actually a brilliant, deeply defensive psychological strategy. It is an unconscious distraction mechanism. As long as you are too busy responding to urgent emails, checking the fluctuations of your retirement portfolio, or chasing the next artificial milestone, you do not have to face the terrifying void waiting for you when the screens turn off. You do not have to ask yourself why you crave external validation so desperately, or why the mere thought of slowing down feels like an existential death sentence. This is the collective blind spot of our generation. We are a nation of highly functional, deeply exhausted individuals running a frantic race on a treadmill, wondering why we have not crossed the finish line of fulfillment. The problem is not that you lack talent, drive, or intelligence. You have plenty of that. The real problem is that you are fighting an intense internal war with half of your own army locked in the basement. Every single time you try to launch yourself forward and skyrocket into your true potential, your subconscious blind spot triggers an immediate counterattack to keep you safe in the familiar zone. You procrastinate on the creative projects that matter most to your soul. You push away the people who actually care about you. You self-sabotage your career right at the precipice of a major, life-changing breakthrough. It genuinely feels like the universe is conspiring against you, but in reality, it is just your unexamined shadow demanding to be recognized. Most people live, work, and die completely inside this blind spot. They accept a heavily watered-down version of their potential, fully convinced that life is just inherently unfair or that they simply do not have what it takes to break free. They look at the rare individuals who truly skyrocket, those individuals who move through the world with an unshakable sense of clarity, magnetic authority, and total creative freedom, and they falsely assume it is just a matter of good luck, privilege, or genetics. But it has nothing to do with luck. The individuals who break through the societal noise are the ones who dared to look directly into the abyss of their own internal psychology. They understood a fundamental Jungian truth that the modern world has forgotten: your greatest power, your rawest creativity, and your most authentic strength are not hidden in your conscious persona. They are buried alive inside your deepest blind spot. The very things you spend your entire life running away from, your repressed anger, your hidden vulnerabilities, your unexpressed wild desires, are the exact raw materials required to fuel your ultimate evolutionary leap. When you finally learn to bring these hidden psychological forces into the light of awareness, you stop merely reacting to the world and you start consciously creating it. You unlock an authentic charisma and a level of strategic clarity that leaves everyone else wondering how you suddenly bypass the invisible matrix of modern life. But to get to that level of power, we have to stop playing safe with superficial self-help cliches and toxic positivity. We have to courageously deconstruct the actual machinery of the human mind and look at exactly how this psychological trap was constructed in the first place. Because the truth about why you are currently feeling stuck is far more calculated and far more dangerous to your future than you think. And if you do not figure out how this internal system works right now, you might just spend the rest of your life running away from the one thing that has the power to set you free. To truly understand how this mental blind spot operates, we have to look at the architectural blueprint of how it was built in the first place. It begins in early childhood. Every human being is born as a complete psychic circle, containing an infinite spectrum of human traits: aggression, intense creativity, vulnerability, self-interest, raw curiosity, and fierce independence. But a developing child quickly learns that the world is a highly selective environment if you want to survive. You learn very early that when you express raw anger, your parents withdraw their affection. When you are too loud or too eccentric, the school system penalizes you. When you display deep vulnerability, your peers on the playground mock you. In order to secure shelter, acceptance, and love, the human psyche makes a calculated, unconscious trade. It splits the self. It constructs a polished, socially acceptable mask called the persona. The persona is everything you want the world to see: the polite child, the straight-A student, the agreeable teammate, the dependable employee. But what happens to the rest of your authentic nature? The anger, the relentless ambition, the competitive drives, the unconventional desires, and the terrifying vulnerabilities do not simply evaporate. They are cast into the subconscious cellar, forming the rigid, heavy boundaries of your shadow. By the time you enter corporate America or step into adult relationships, this psychological division is completely hardwired. In a hyper-competitive society that demands constant optimization, endless emotional resilience, and professional perfection, your persona becomes your entire identity. You completely convince yourself that you are only the hard worker, the nice guy, the stoic provider, or the flawless perfectionist. But this is the exact moment the blind spot becomes lethal. Because the human psyche demands wholeness, not artificial perfection. The mental energy required to keep your shadow locked in the basement is immense. It drains your psychological battery every single waking hour. Eventually, the pressure builds up to a critical breaking point, and the shadow finds a way out. It does not ask for your conscious permission. Instead, it sneaks past your logical defenses through an insidious psychological mechanism known as projection. Projection is the ultimate optical illusion of the human mind. When your conscious ego refuses to recognize a certain trait within yourself, your brain literally projects that exact trait onto the external world, like a movie theater projector illuminating a blank screen. You do not see your own repressed anger. Instead, you perceive everyone around you as hostile, aggressive, and unfair. You do not recognize your own hidden, desperate craving for control and dominance. Instead, you become hyperfixated on how manipulative and power-hungry your boss, your colleagues, or your partner are. If you find yourself deeply triggered, intensely irritated, or obsessively consumed by the flaws of a specific person in your life, Carl Jung would tell you that you are not actually looking at them. You are looking directly into a mirror of your own blind spot. The sheer intensity of your emotional reaction is the smoking gun. It is proof that they are embodying a piece of your repressed self that you have denied for decades. This is why so many highly intelligent individuals get stuck in exhausting, toxic loops. They spend years fighting external phantoms, arguing with difficult people, and trying to fix broken external systems, completely oblivious to the fact that they are wrestling with their own psychological reflection. This hidden mechanism explains the tragic phenomenon of the professional plateau that haunts so many capable professionals. Think about the brilliant employee who constantly misses out on major promotions despite being the smartest and most capable person in the room. From the outside, they blame corporate politics, bad luck, or favoritism. But if you deconstruct their internal mechanism, you find a deep-seated blind spot. Perhaps they repressed their healthy capacity for aggression and self-assertiveness in childhood because they were taught that being passive and compliant was the only way to be loved. Now, as an adult, they cannot negotiate a higher salary, they cannot firmly defend their boundaries, and they unconsciously resent anyone who boldly takes up space and claims power. Their shadow sabotages their success by generating paralyzing imposter syndrome or intense procrastination right when they need to step up and lead. They honestly believe they are just avoiding failure, but their subconscious is actually protecting them from the terrifying prospect of exposing their hidden ambition, which they have unconsciously labeled as dangerous or greedy. The economic and psychological cost of leaving this internal machinery unexamined is catastrophic to your long-term potential. When you operate with a massive psychological blind spot, your life ceases to be an evolution and instead becomes a series of predictable, compulsive reenactments. You subconsciously seek out the exact same toxic relationship dynamics because they match the familiar internal tension of your childhood split. You choose career paths that look prestigious on a resume or a LinkedIn profile but actively drain your soul, because your persona is desperate for external applause while your true self is suffocating in the dark. You suffer from chronic, unexplained burnout, sudden decision paralysis, and profound creative blocks. These are not physiological defects or a lack of discipline. These are the warning lights on your psychological dashboard signaling that your internal operating system is running out of fuel. You cannot skyrocket past the noise or achieve genuine sovereignty if half of your creative intelligence, your sharpest gut instincts, and your raw power are being actively suppressed to maintain a fragile, artificial mask. The trap is perfectly secure because the one place you refuse to look is the exact place where the key to your liberation is hidden. To truly break this cycle and unlock the explosive growth you are capable of, you must transition from passive survival to active psychological engineering. You must learn how to intentionally descend into the blind spot, confront the hidden forces operating within it, and systematically integrate them into a unified, unstoppable engine of personal power. To break free from this invisible architecture of self-sabotage, you have to realize that the conventional self-help industry has been selling you a dangerous lie. For decades, American culture has been obsessed with the narrative of positive thinking, constant self-improvement, and the ruthless elimination of weakness. We are told to overwrite our insecurities with affirmations, to suppress our dark moods with forced gratitude, and to cut out toxic people from our lives. But if you understand Carl Jung's work, you see that this approach is the equivalent of painting over the check engine light on your car dashboard and pretending the problem is solved. You cannot cure a structural psychological split with surface-level discipline. You cannot out-hustle a shadow that controls your subconscious mind. True sovereignty and the ability to skyrocket beyond the collective blind spot do not come from becoming a pure, flawless saint of productivity. It comes from achieving psychological integration. It comes from having the courage to make friends with your monsters, to reclaim the raw energy locked in your basement, and to assemble your entire fragmented self into a single, unified engine of absolute personal power. The transition from being a victim of your blind spot to becoming a master of your psychology requires a radical paradigm shift. You must stop trying to fight the external mirror. When you find yourself intensely triggered by a difficult colleague, an unsupportive partner, or a chaotic social environment, you must resist the immediate, low-level urge to react, complain, or fix the outside world. Instead, you must immediately turn the lens inward and ask the ultimate Jungian question: what does the intensity of my emotional reaction tell me about the parts of myself that I have disowned? This is not passive weakness, it is the highest form of emotional intelligence and strategic asset management. The moment you neutralize the emotional charge of a trigger by recognizing it as a projection of your own shadow, you instantly strip the external world of its power to manipulate you. You stop bleeding psychological energy into useless conflicts, and you begin the profound process of reclaiming your authentic authority. Let us look at how this systemic integration works in the high-stakes landscape of modern career and wealth building. Imagine an individual who has spent their entire adult life playing it safe, avoiding conflict, and trying to be the ultimate agreeable team player. They have deeply repressed their natural capacity for aggression, fierce competition, and self-interest because they were conditioned to believe that these traits are inherently bad or dangerous. As a result, they are consistently underpaid, overlooked for promotions, and silently resentful of the bolder, more ruthless individuals who confidently command the room. A standard self-help coach would tell them to take a public speaking course or practice power poses in the bathroom mirror. But a Jungian framework demands a much deeper, more permanent solution. This individual does not need a new surface-level technique, they need to integrate their repressed aggression. They need to realize that anger and aggression, when brought into the light of conscious awareness, are not destructive forces. They are the exact raw materials required for strong boundary setting, for cutthroat corporate negotiation, and for the fierce determination needed to take massive creative risks. When you integrate your shadow, you do not become a bad person, you become a whole person who possesses the full spectrum of human capability. You gain the ability to step into a boardroom or a salary negotiation with an unshakable, magnetic gravity because you are no longer fighting an internal war with your own hidden ambition. This process of systematic integration is what separates the elite performers from the exhausted masses. The individuals who truly skyrocket in life do not have fewer flaws or fewer dark impulses than you do. In fact, they often have much larger, darker shadows. The difference is that they have done the heavy internal lifting to bring those shadow elements into alignment with their conscious goals. They have stopped pretending to be perfectly nice, perfectly stoic, or perfectly balanced. They embrace their deep-seated vanity and channel it into building an exceptional, world-class personal brand. They acknowledge their intense, cold competitiveness and use it as high-octane fuel to disrupt stagnant industries. They accept their deep vulnerabilities and use them to connect with audiences on a level of profound, raw authenticity that leaves traditional, hyper-polished corporate marketing completely irrelevant. They are entirely transparent with themselves, which makes them completely unshakable to the outside world. You cannot shame a person who has already looked into the darkest corners of their own soul and owned everything they found there. To implement this in your daily life, you must develop a practice of radical psychological auditing. You must become deeply curious about your own resistance. When you find yourself heavily procrastinating on a major career pivot or a creative project, do not berate yourself for a lack of discipline. Sit quietly with the resistance and trace it back to its root. Ask yourself what identity you are trying to protect. Are you avoiding the project because you are terrified of failing, or are you actually terrified of succeeding and exposing your true, unedited power to a world that might judge you? When you feel a sudden wave of inexplicable anxiety or burnout, recognize it not as a biological malfunction, but as a direct message from your subconscious telling you that your current lifestyle is a lie constructed solely to please your persona. By systematically dismantling these internal illusions, you begin to dissolve the boundaries of your blind spot. You stop wasting immense psychological bandwidth on maintaining an artificial mask, and you unlock a massive reservoir of creative focus, sharp strategic clarity, and unyielding stamina that has been trapped underground for decades. You enter a state of psychological flow where your conscious desires and your subconscious drives are completely aligned, moving you toward your highest potential with the unstoppable force of an avalanche. When we zoom out from the architecture of the individual psyche and look at the broader trajectory of the modern American landscape over the next decade, the stakes of this psychological integration become undeniably absolute. We are currently standing at the precipice of a massive socio-economic and cultural shift. For generations, the traditional American dream was built almost entirely on the foundation of the persona. We were handed a rigid, highly standardized blueprint for success: behave well in the educational system, secure a stable corporate position, invest quietly in a 401k, buy a house in a quiet neighborhood, and suppress any radical individuality in exchange for long-term economic security. It was a societal contract that heavily rewarded psychological fragmentation. But as we look around today, that industrial-era contract is completely disintegrating. In an age characterized by hyperinflation, massive corporate restructuring, the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence, and a digitally accelerated economy, playing it safe and relying solely on an obedient, polished persona is no longer a guarantee of survival. In fact, it has become the most dangerous vulnerability a person can possess. We have entered an era where the global economy is actively designed to monetize human psychological blind spots. If you do not consciously own your shadow, there is an algorithm, a political narrative, or a corporate marketing machine that is perfectly calibrated to exploit it. The outrage culture we see dominating our social media feeds, the intense political polarization tearing communities apart, and the hyperconsumerism driving record levels of personal debt are not just random cultural phenomena. They are the macro-level manifestations of a society that refuses to integrate its collective shadow. Millions of exhausted individuals are unconsciously projecting their repressed fears, their feelings of inadequacy, and their unacknowledged anger onto external screens, buying products they do not need to impress people they do not like, and fighting ideological wars to avoid facing the terrifying silence of their own minds. The individuals who will thrive in this turbulent new decade, the ones who will genuinely skyrocket and build untouchable wealth, resilient family structures, and absolute personal sovereignty are those who refuse to participate in this collective unconsciousness. They are the psychological outliers. By pulling their darkest fears, their rawest ambitions, and their most vulnerable truths out of the blind spot and into the light of conscious strategy, these integrated individuals become fundamentally immune to external manipulation. They cannot be bullied by toxic corporate hierarchies because their sense of self-worth is no longer tethered to a manufactured professional title. They cannot be paralyzed by the fear of economic uncertainty because they have unlocked the raw, predatory adaptability that was previously locked away in their shadow. When you operate as a whole, integrated human being, you stop reacting to the changing world with anxiety and start navigating it with clinical, ruthless precision. You begin to make choices based on deep intuition and unapologetic authenticity rather than societal expectation. This profoundly alters the trajectory of your legacy. You stop passing down the invisible chains of generational trauma and unspoken resentment to your children because you have finally broken the cycle within yourself. You create an environment where the people around you are unconsciously given permission to drop their own masks, fostering relationships and business partnerships built on radical truth rather than fragile politeness. Let us return to that familiar image we started with. The high-achieving American, sitting alone in a beautiful apartment at the end of an exhausting day, feeling the fog of anxiety rolling back in. But this time, the narrative ends differently. This time, instead of running away from the void, instead of reaching for a distraction, a screen, or another self-help book that promises to fix them, they sit perfectly still. They turn around and face the darkness head-on. They look at their own shadow, they acknowledge the years of internal division, and they finally understand that the exact thing they have been running from is the exact thing that holds their ultimate salvation. The invisible ceiling shatters. The blind spot dissolves. And what is left is not a perfect, flawless human being, but something infinitely more powerful, a complete, fully integrated force of nature, standing at the absolute center of their own reality, ready to move forward with a terrifying and beautiful clarity. The illusion of fate is broken, and the real journey finally begins. Here at Lucid Soma, our mission is to explore these hidden depths. We believe that true awakening does not happen by looking up at the light, but by having the courage to illuminate the darkness within. It is at this exact intersection of the conscious and the subconscious, the body and the mind, that your true potential is waiting to be claimed. If this journey through the shadow resonated with your own experience, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and perhaps share your thoughts in the comments below. What is the one part of your own shadow that you are finally ready to bring into the light? Let's continue this conversation together. Until next time, stay aware, stay courageous, and remember that the only way out is through.